He thought she was just a clumsy waitress looking for a handout. He thought his money made him untouchable. But when billionaire Arthur Sterling walked back to his table and saw a stranger holding the hands of his disabled daughter, swaying to a silent rhythm, he didn't see kindness. He saw a threat. He prepared to destroy her life, just like he destroyed his competition. But he didn't know that this waitress, Katie, held a secret key to his past, a secret buried in a police report 10 years ago. What happens next isn't a fairy tale, it's a reckoning. You might think you know where this is going, but trust me, you are not ready for the truth. The Obsidian Room was the kind of restaurant where the silence cost more than the food. It was a place where the air conditioning hummed at a specific frequency designed to soothe the wealthy, and the clinking of silver against bone china was the only acceptable interruption to the hushed conversations about mergers and acquisitions. For Arthur Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Dynamics, this was just a Tuesday. Arthur sat at the best table in the house, a corner booth upholstered in crushed velvet, offering a panoramic view of the Chicago skyline. He was a man carved from granite and tailored wool, 48 years old, with salt and pepper hair that cost a fortune to maintain, and eyes that could drop a stock price with a single glare. He was on his phone, typing a furious email to his legal team in London, ignoring the $200 appetizer cooling in front of him. Across from him sat Jessica Voss. Jessica was 32, stunning, and as sharp as the diamonds choking her neck. She was Arthur's fiancée, a woman who treated marriage like a corporate takeover. She was currently picking at a lobster tail, her eyes darting around the room to see who was watching them. And then there was Lily. Lily was 10 years old. She sat in a customized wheelchair at the head of the table, slightly removed from the intimate spacing of Arthur and Jessica. Lily had cerebral palsy. Her movements were often jerky, her muscles spastic, and she was non-verbal, communicating mostly through a tablet she had mounted to her chair, or through subtle shifts in her facial expressions that only a patient observer would understand. Tonight, Arthur was not a patient observer. "Arthur," Jessica hissed, leaning over the table, her voice low. "She's doing it again." Arthur didn't look up from his phone. "Doing what?" "The noise. That humming." Arthur finally glanced up. Lily was rocking slightly back and forth. A low, guttural sound was escaping her throat. It wasn't a cry. It was a hum, a repetitive, rhythmic drone. To Lily, it was self-soothing. To the patrons of the Obsidian Room, it was a disturbance. "Lily, stop it," Arthur said, his voice flat. He didn't sound like a father. He sounded like a boss reprimanding an intern. Lily didn't stop. She couldn't. The lights in the restaurant were too dim, the smell of truffle oil was too strong, and the tension radiating off her father was overwhelming her sensory processing. She needed an outlet. Her hand, curled tight against her chest, flailed out, knocking a crystal water glass onto the floor. Crash. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. The water splashed across the expensive Italian tile, soaking the hem of Jessica's designer dress. "Oh, for God's sake!" Jessica shrieked, jumping up and garnering the attention of the entire restaurant. "Look at this! This is silk, Arthur! Vintage silk!" Arthur pinched the bridge of his nose, his jaw tightening. He didn't ask if Lily was okay. He didn't check to see if the glass had cut her. He looked at the mess, and then he looked at his daughter with a look of exhaustion that bordered on resentment. "I told you we should have left her with the nanny," Jessica snapped, dabbing frantically at her dress with a linen napkin. "It's impossible to have a civilized evening. She doesn't belong here, Arthur." Arthur stared at Lily. The girl was shrinking into her chair, her eyes wide with panic. She knew she had done something wrong, but her body wouldn't let her fix it. Tears welled up in her large, brown eyes that looked exactly like her late mother's. That was the problem. Every time Arthur looked at Lily, he didn't see a child who needed him. He saw the complications during childbirth that had taken his wife, Margaret, away from him. He saw the living reminder of the worst day of his life. "Sit down, Jessica," Arthur commanded quietly. "I'll handle it." He raised his hand to summon a waiter, his face a mask of cold fury. He wasn't angry at the spilled water. He was angry at the imperfection of his life. He was a man who controlled skylines, yet he couldn't control a 10-year-old girl. "Get someone to clean this up," Arthur barked at the maitre d', who rushed over. "And bring the check. We're leaving." "But the entree hasn't arrived," Jessica protested. "We are leaving," Arthur repeated, his voice leaving no room for argument. He stood up and walked away from the table to take a sudden incoming call, leaving his fiancée fuming and his disabled daughter trembling in a puddle of water and broken glass. He turned his back on them, pacing toward the balcony for better reception. He didn't see the waitress approaching. He didn't see the woman who was about to change the trajectory of his entire existence. Katie Jenkins balanced a heavy tray of dirty dishes on her left shoulder, her back screaming in protest. It was the third double shift she had worked in a row. At 28, Katie looked older than she was. Her hands were rough from harsh detergents, and there were dark circles under her eyes that no amount of drugstore concealer could hide. She was invisible here. To the customers of the Obsidian Room, she was just a pair of floating hands that refilled wine and cleared crumbs. She had heard the crash. Everyone had. From the service station, Katie watched the scene unfold. She saw the wealthy woman in the silk dress berating the child. She saw the father, the famous Arthur Sterling, whom she recognized from the business magazines the manager left in the break room, walk away in disgust. But mostly, Katie saw the girl. She saw the way the child's shoulders were shaking. She saw the terrified look in her eyes as she stared at the broken glass, unable to move her wheelchair away from the mess. Katie felt a pull in her chest, a familiar ache. She knew that look. It was the look of someone trapped inside their own body, desperate to be understood. Ignoring the manager's strict rule about assigned sections, Katie set her tray down on a side table and grabbed a stack of fresh towels. She walked over to the table, not with the subservient rush of a server, but with a calm, deliberate purpose. Jessica was busy typing on her phone, complaining to a friend via text, completely ignoring Lily. Katie knelt down. She didn't start cleaning the floor immediately. Instead, she knelt directly in front of Lily's wheelchair, disregarding the water soaking into the knees of her uniform trousers. "Hey there," Katie whispered, her voice low and melodic. Lily flinched, her head jerking to the side. "It's okay," Katie said, smiling. It was a genuine smile, warm and devoid of pity. "It's just water. Water dries. Glass breaks. It happens to everyone. I dropped a whole tray of lobsters last week. Made a much bigger noise than this." Lily's eyes locked onto Katie's. For the first time all night, someone was looking at her, not past her. Katie reached out slowly. She didn't grab Lily. She offered her hand, palm up, hovering it in the space between them. "My name is Katie. That's a pretty dress you have on. Is it blue or violet?" Lily didn't answer verbally, but her breathing hitched. Her hand, the one that was curled tight, began to loosen. Suddenly, the piano player in the corner of the restaurant shifted songs. He began playing a soft, melancholic rendition of Clair de Lune. Katie's head tilted. A spark of recognition flashed in her eyes, a ghost of a past life she had tried to bury. Without thinking, Katie began to hum. It wasn't the off-key humming of a distracted worker. It was perfect pitch, She harmonized with the piano, her fingers beginning to move in the air. Lily watched Katie's hands. Katie noticed the girl's fascination. She saw the way Lily's fingers were twitching, trying to mimic the movement. Katie realized something instantly. The girl isn't acting out. She's feeling the music. "You like that?" Katie whispered. "You feel the rhythm, don't you?" Katie stood up, slowly. The restaurant was dimly lit, and the table was somewhat secluded in the corner. Jessica was still oblivious, scrolling through Instagram. Katie didn't return to cleaning. Instead, she took a step back and extended her arms. She began to move. It wasn't a waitress moving, it was a dancer. Her posture shifted, her spine elongated. She did a subtle port de bras, her arms flowing like water, mimicking the gentle waves of the music. Lily's eyes went wide. She let out a sound, a happy, breathless gasp. Katie stepped closer and gently took Lily's spastic hands in hers. "Let's dance, sweetie." Katie swayed, guiding Lily's stiff arms into the movement. She treated the wheelchair not as a cage, but as a partner. She spun Lily explicitly gently, then dipped her own body, creating a fluid line that connected them. For a moment, Lily wasn't the disabled girl who ruined dinner. She was a ballerina, her face transformed. The tension left her jaw, replaced by a radiant, lopsided smile that lit up the gloomy corner of the room. Lily let out a laugh, a loud, barking, joyful laugh that echoed through the restaurant. It was a beautiful moment, pure, human. And it was the exact moment Arthur Sterling walked back into the room. Arthur had just finished a call where he lost $3 million on a stalled contract. He was already seething. As he rounded the pillar to his table, he didn't see a beautiful moment. He saw a stranger touching his daughter. He saw a waitress in a dirty uniform gripping Lily's hands, spinning the wheelchair. From his angle, it looked chaotic. He saw Lily's head thrown back and heard the loud, guttural laugh, which he misinterpreted as distress or mockery. The trauma of the past, the need to protect Lily from a world that stared, the guilt he felt for her condition, twisted in his gut into a knot of blind rage. "What the hell are you doing?" Arthur's voice boomed across the restaurant, silencing the piano player instantly. Katie froze. She dropped her hands, the grace vanishing from her posture as she snapped back to reality. She turned to see Arthur Sterling charging at her like a bull. Sir, I was just—" Katie stammered, stepping back. "Get your hands off her," Arthur roared. He positioned himself between Katie and the wheelchair, shielding Lily as if Katie were an attacker. "Who do you think you are? You think because she's disabled you can play with her? Is she a toy to you?" "No. Sir, please. She was upset. I was just trying to—" "You were humiliating her," Arthur spat, his face inches from Katie's. "Making a spectacle. Do you know who I am?" "Arthur, she was touching Lily all over," Jessica chimed in, suddenly sensing an opportunity to be the victim. "I was too scared to say anything. She just lunged at her." Katie looked at Jessica in disbelief. "That's a lie. I was dancing with her. She liked it." "Dancing?" Arthur laughed, a cruel, cold sound. "Look at her. She can't walk, let alone dance. How dare you mock her condition?" Arthur looked down at Lily. But Lily wasn't crying anymore. She was looking at her father, making a low keen of protest, reaching her hand out toward Katie. But Arthur was too blinded by his own narrative to see it. He only saw a waitress who had crossed the line. He turned on his heel and pointed a shaking finger at the maître d', who had come running. "Fire her," Arthur commanded. "Right now, or I buy this building and evict you by morning." "Sir, Katie is one of our best," the manager started. "Did I stutter?" Arthur's voice was deadly quiet now. "She assaulted a minor. In fact, call the police. I want to file charges." Katie's blood ran cold. The police. She couldn't deal with the police. Not with her record. Not with the probation officer breathing down her neck from a crime she didn't commit 5 years ago. If the police came, if they ran her ID, she wouldn't just lose her job. She would lose everything. "Please," Katie whispered, her voice cracking. "Mr. Sterling, I didn't mean any harm. Please don't call the police. I have a family." Arthur adjusted his cufflinks, his eyes devoid of mercy. "You should have thought about that before you put your hands on my daughter." He pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the commissioner directly." As Arthur dialed, Katie looked at Lily one last time. The girl was weeping silently, her hand still reaching out into the empty air where Katie's hand had been. Katie turned and ran. She ran through the kitchen, out the back alley door, and into the cold Chicago night, leaving her apron and her dignity on the floor of the obsidian room. But she couldn't outrun the past, and she had no idea that the man chasing her out of the restaurant was the same man who, unknowingly, had signed the order that ruined her life 10 years ago. The silence in the back seat of the Maybach was suffocating. Arthur Sterling sat stiffly, staring out the window at the blurring lights of Chicago. Beside him, Jessica was frantically texting, the glow of her phone illuminating her irritated scowl. In the spacious rear-facing seat, Lily was strapped into her wheelchair, her head slumped against her chest. She hadn't made a sound since they left the restaurant. She had shut down completely, a defense mechanism Arthur knew all too well. "Can you believe the audacity of that girl?" Jessica broke the silence, not looking up from her phone. "I'm looking her up on LinkedIn. I bet she's not even a real waitress, probably a squatter. I'm telling you, Arthur, she was trying to snatch Lily's tablet, or maybe the diamond bracelet you bought her." Arthur didn't answer. His anger was still simmering, but it was cooling into a hard, heavy knot in his stomach. Something wasn't sitting right. He kept replaying the image in his mind. The waitress, Katie, hadn't looked malicious. When he screamed, she hadn't looked like a thief caught in the act. She had looked terrified. And Lily, the sound Lily had made. It wasn't a scream of pain. Arthur closed his eyes. It was a laugh. He hadn't heard Lily laugh like that in years. Not since before the surgeries. Not since Margaret died. "Driver," Arthur said suddenly, his voice raspy. "Turn around." Jessica dropped her phone. "What? Arthur, are you insane? I need to get this dress to the dry cleaner before the stain sets." "I said turn around," Arthur snapped, his authority cutting through the car like a knife. "Go back to the obsidian room." "Why?" Jessica shrilled. "Because," Arthur said, looking at his daughter's sleeping face. "I need to see the tapes." 20 minutes later, Arthur was standing in the cramped security office of the restaurant. The manager, a sweating man named Paul, was typing furiously on a keyboard. "I really don't think this is necessary, Mr. Sterling," Paul stammered. "We fired her. She's gone. We can ban her from the premises." "Play it," Arthur commanded, crossing his arms. On the grainy monitor, the scene unfolded in black and white. Arthur watched as he and Jessica left the table. He saw himself storming off to the balcony. He saw Jessica immediately pull out her phone, turning her back on Lily. He watched Lily rock back and forth. He saw the water glass shatter. He saw Jessica yell at the girl, then return to her phone, leaving Lily sitting in the mess, shaking. Arthur's jaw tightened. She ignored her. Then Katie entered the frame. Arthur leaned in. On the screen, Katie didn't lunge. She didn't grab. She knelt. She cleaned the floor. But then she stopped. She spoke to Lily. Even without audio, the body language was undeniable. Katie was gentle. Then the dancing started. Arthur watched, mesmerized. He saw Katie bow. He saw her lift her arms. He saw Lily, his broken, silent Lily, raise her own stiff arms in response. He watched Katie take Lily's hands and spin the chair with the grace of a professional. He saw Lily throw her head back in pure, unadulterated joy, and then he saw himself charge into the frame like a monster. He saw the way Katie cowered. He saw Jessica jump up and point fingers, pantomiming a distress she hadn't felt seconds before. Arthur felt a wave of nausea hit him. She was dancing, Arthur whispered. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. She was making my daughter happy. He turned to the manager, his eyes wild. Where is she? Where does she live? I can't give out employee information, sir. It's against policy. Arthur slammed his hand onto the desk, making the monitors jump. I just threatened to have an innocent woman arrested because my fiancé is a liar and I am a blind fool. Give me her file, now! The manager scrambled to a filing cabinet and pulled out a thin manila folder. He handed it to Arthur with shaking hands. Arthur ripped it open. Name, Katie Jenkins. Address, 402E, 89th. St. Apt 4B. Emergency contact, none. Arthur stared at the address. It was in the Ironworks district, a neighborhood known for abandoned factories and crushing poverty. It was a place where people went when they had nowhere else to go. Arthur grabbed the file. He didn't wait for Jessica. He didn't wait for the manager's apology. He walked out of the office, past the confused patrons, and out to his car. Get out, Arthur said to Jessica as he opened the car door. Excuse me? Jessica blinked. Get out of the car. Take a taxi. We're done. Arthur, you can't be serious. Over a waitress? Over my daughter, Arthur said coldly. You lied to me. You ignored her. You're done. He slammed the door before she could respond and signaled the driver. 402 East 89th Street. Drive fast. The building was a crumbling brick tenement that smelled of damp concrete and old frying oil. The elevator was broken, naturally. Arthur Sterling, in his $3,000 suit, climbed the 4 flights of stairs, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't know what he was going to say. I'm sorry? It seemed inadequate. Here's a check. It seemed insulting. He reached apartment 4B. The door was thin, the paint peeling. He raised his hand to knock, but the door creaked open slightly under the pressure of his knuckle. It wasn't locked. The lock was broken. Katie! Arthur called out, pushing the door open. The apartment was tiny. It was essentially one room, a mattress on the floor in the corner, a hot plate on a crate. It was cleaner than the hallway, but it was the home of someone who owned almost nothing. Katie wasn't there. Arthur stepped inside, feeling like an intruder in a shrine of sorrow. He looked around. There was no TV, no computer, just essentials. And then he saw the wall. The far wall was covered in newspaper clippings and old photographs. They were taped up carefully, forming a collage of a life that once was. Arthur walked closer. The photos showed a young girl, a teenager. She was wearing a tutu. She was leaping through the air, her form perfect, her face radiant. She was beautiful. Wait, Arthur thought. I know this face. He looked at the newspaper clippings. Local prodigy wins Juilliard Scholarship. Katie Jenkins, the future of American ballet. Katie, the waitress. She was a ballerina. A brilliant one. Arthur's eyes scanned down the wall, moving from the triumphs to the tragedies. The headlines changed. Gala theft. Diamond watch stolen at Sterling charity ball. Rising star arrested in grand larceny scandal. Arthur froze, the breath trapped in his throat. Sterling charity ball. His memory unlocked like a rusted gate. 10 years ago, he had hosted a gala for his company's anniversary. It was at the Grand Hotel downtown. He remembered the night vividly because it was the night he had received the prototype for the Titan watch, a timepiece worth $250,000. He remembered leaving it in the coat check room for safekeeping while he gave a speech. When he came back, it was gone. He remembered the rage. He had demanded the police search everyone. They had found the watch in the backpack of an 18-year-old girl working the coat check. She had been crying, swearing she didn't take it, claiming someone else must have planted it there. Arthur hadn't listened. He was a man of principle. Thieves must be punished, he had told the press. He had pressed for the maximum sentence to make an example. The girl had pleaded guilty to a lesser charge to avoid 20 years in prison. She took a felony plea, 3 years in juvenile detention and adult prison. Arthur looked at the next document taped to the wall. It was a letter from the Juilliard School. Revocation of scholarship due to criminal conviction. Arthur's knees gave out. He sat down heavily on the edge of the mattress. He did this. He had destroyed her. Katie Jenkins wasn't just a clumsy waitress. She was the prodigy he had sent to prison. He had taken her future, her dance, her life, and turned it into ash over a watch he stopped wearing a month later. And tonight, despite everything he had done to her, she had seen his daughter, the daughter he struggled to connect with, and she had shared the only thing she had left, her dance. Arthur looked at the small table beside the bed. There was a single battered notebook. He opened it. It wasn't a diary, it was a ledger. Rent, $600 food, $50 Lily's medicine. Donation, $100. Arthur frowned. Lily's medicine? He turned the page. It was a list of names. St. Jude's. Children's Relief. Katie, living in squalor, convicted of theft, was donating small amounts of money to children's hospitals. But the last entry chilled him to the bone. Date, today. Status, fired. Balance, $0. Note, it's over. I can't do this anymore. The ink was fresh. Panic surged through Arthur. He stood up, knocking the notebook to the floor. Underneath it was a folded piece of paper. A bus ticket. Destination, Lake Michigan Cliffs. Time, 11:30 p.m. Arthur checked his watch. The Titan watch. The very same model that started this nightmare. It was 11:15 p.m. No! Arthur gasped. No, no, no! He realized with a terrifying clarity what "I can't do this anymore" meant for a woman who had lost everything, been humiliated by the man who ruined her, and had just lost her last means of survival. He didn't wait. He ran. He ran out of the apartment, down the stairs, slipping on the slick concrete. He burst out onto the street. His driver was waiting. "The lake!" Arthur screamed, diving into the back seat. "Get to the North Avenue cliffs, now! Drive like you're dying!" The driver didn't ask questions. He slammed on the gas, the tires screeching against the asphalt. Arthur sat in the back, clutching the crumpled bus ticket. He pulled out his phone and dialed the police commissioner. "This is Arthur Sterling," he yelled into the phone. "I need a patrol car at the North Avenue cliffs. A woman is in danger. And listen to me. If anything happens to her, I will burn this city to the ground." He looked out the window, praying to a God he hadn't spoken to in years. The wind off Lake Michigan was a physical weight, a wall of freezing air that battered the cliffs of the North Avenue shoreline. It was a desolate stretch of rock and concrete, far removed from the glittering skyline of the city, the skyline that Arthur Sterling owned, but which had rejected Katie Jenkins. Katie stood on the precipice of the old retaining wall. Her uniform was thin, offering no protection against the biting cold, but she didn't feel it. Hypothermia was a distant concern compared to the numbness that had consumed her soul. Below her, the black water churned, crashing against the jagged rocks with a violence that sounded like applause. "Do it," a voice whispered in her head. "Just step forward. No more double shifts. No more parole officers. No more looking at the stage from the alleyway." She closed her eyes. The image of Lily's face, that sweet, desperate smile flashed in her mind. It hurt. That moment of connection in the restaurant had been the first time in 10 years Katie had felt like herself, like the artist she used to be. And it had been snatched away in seconds, crushed by the same arrogance that had taken her freedom a decade ago. "I tried," she whispered to the wind. "I really tried." She lifted her foot. The rubber sole of her sneaker slipped slightly on the frost-slicked concrete. Screech! The sound of tires locking up on asphalt tore through the roar of the wind. A car had jumped the curb, tearing through the metal chain-link barrier 50 yards away. Headlights blinded her, sweeping across the darkness like searchlights. Katie didn't turn around. She didn't care. It was probably security, or the police. Just another authority figure coming to tell her she was trespassing. "Katie!" The voice was ragged, torn from a throat raw with screaming. It wasn't a policeman. It was familiar. Katie froze, her foot hovering over the abyss. Arthur Sterling scrambled out of the back of the Maybach before it had fully stopped. He fell onto the gravel, scraping the palms of his hands, hands that had never known a day's labor, shredding the skin. He didn't feel it. He scrambled up, his expensive Italian loafers slipping in the mud, and ran. He had never run like this. Not for a deal, not for a flight. He ran with the desperation of a man chasing his own salvation. "Katie, stop!" Katie turned slowly. The wind whipped her hair across her face, masking her expression. She looked like a ghost against the black sky. "Go away," she said, her voice faint but carried by the wind. "Haven't you done enough?" Arthur skidded to a halt 10 feet from her. He held his hands up, palms open, chest heaving. His suit was ruined, mud splattered up to his knees, his tie loose. He looked nothing like the titan of industry. He looked broken. "Please," Arthur gasped, the cold air burning his lungs. "Please, step back from the edge." "Why?" Katie asked. Her voice was devoid of emotion. It was the terrifying calm of the decided. "You fired me. You threatened to arrest me. You said I assaulted your daughter. You took the last thing I had." "I was wrong," Arthur shouted, taking a cautious step forward. "I was wrong about everything." "It doesn't matter," Katie said, turning back to the water. "It's too late. It's been too late for 10 years. "I know," Arthur screamed. The words hung in the air, heavier than the wind. Katie stiffened. She turned back to him, her eyes narrowing. "What did you say?" Arthur fell to his knees. The rocks dug into his legs, but he stayed there, a penitent sinner before his judge. "I know who you are, Katie. I know about the watch. I know about the gala. I know I sent you to prison." Katie's face contorted. The shock broke through her numbness. You remember." "I didn't," Arthur admitted, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the sweat. "I didn't remember until tonight. I saw your wall. I went to your apartment. I saw the clippings." Katie let out a bitter, jagged laugh. "You went to my apartment? To do what? Evict me too?" "To beg for your forgiveness," Arthur choked out. "I destroyed your life over a watch I don't even wear. I let my lawyers crush an 18-year-old girl because I was too busy to look at the security tapes myself. I was arrogant. I was cruel. And tonight I saw you give my daughter the only moment of joy she's had since her mother died. And I repaid you with the same cruelty." He crawled forward on his hands and knees. "Katie, please, don't let my sins kill you. Don't let me be a murderer." Katie looked down at him. For 10 years she had hated this man. She had hated the name Sterling. She had cursed him in her cell block. She had cursed him while scrubbing floors. She had dreamed of this moment, of him begging. But now that it was here, she didn't feel triumph. She just felt tired. "You can't fix it," she said softly. You can't give me those years back. You can't give me my legs back. I haven't danced on point in 8 years. My ankles are weak. My reputation is gone. I'm a felon, Arthur. I'm nothing. You are not a nothing, Arthur roared, standing up. You are the only person who speaks her language. Katie blinked. What? Lily? Arthur pointed back toward the city. My daughter. You saw her. You saw her. Everyone else sees a wheelchair. Everyone else sees a problem to be managed. Jessica sees a burden. But you saw a dancer. Arthur took another step. He was close enough to touch her now. Katie, Lily hasn't spoken a word in 3 years, but tonight, she laughed. She moved. You unlocked something in her that I couldn't. If you jump, you take that key with you. You leave her alone in the dark with a father who doesn't know how to reach her. Katie looked at Arthur's eyes. They weren't the cold, dead eyes of the CEO in the restaurant. They were the terrified eyes of a father. She needs you, Arthur whispered. And I need you to teach me how to be the father she deserves. Katie looked down at the water. The waves were hypnotic. It would be so easy to let go, to just sleep. But then she felt a phantom sensation in her hands, the feeling of Lily's small, stiff fingers relaxing in her grip. The rhythm, the connection. Katie took a ragged breath. She shivered violently, the cold finally piercing through her shock. She stammered. I have nowhere to go. I have no money. I have no home. Arthur reached out his hand. You have a home with us. Not as a servant, as a savior. Please, Katie, take my hand. Let me try to balance the ledger. Katie stared at his hand. It was shaking. Slowly, agonizingly, she reached out. Her rough, chapped fingers brushed against his manicured ones. Arthur didn't wait. He lunged forward, grabbing her wrist with a grip of iron, and pulled her violently away from the edge. They collapsed together onto the frozen gravel, Arthur wrapping his arms around her to shield her from the wind, sobbing into her shoulder. I've got you, he wept. I've got you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. High above them, on the bluff, red and blue lights began to flash as the police finally arrived. But the rescue had already happened. The VIP wing of St. Jude's Hospital was quieter than the Obsidian Room, but it smelled of antiseptic and guilt. Arthur Sterling paced the hallway outside room 304. He had been pacing for 6 hours. He had refused to change his clothes. His muddy suit was drying into a stiff, brown crust. His shoes were ruined. He looked like a madman, and the nurses were giving him a wide berth. Detective Miller, a weary-looking man with a notepad, stood by the coffee machine. Mr. Sterling, Miller said, walking over. We ran her prints like you asked, but we also pulled the old case file from the 2014 gala theft. Arthur stopped pacing. And? It's messy, Miller said, scratching his chin. The conviction was based almost entirely on the fact that the watch was in her bag. No fingerprints on the watch itself. No witnesses. And we found a supplemental report that was never filed by the original investigating officer. Arthur felt the blood drain from his face. What report? A statement from a catering manager. Guy named Vance. He was fired 2 weeks after the gala for fencing stolen goods. He admitted to a CI that he stashed the goods in the coat check girl's bag when he saw security doing a sweep, intending to retrieve it later. He never got the chance because your team pushed for an immediate arrest. Arthur closed his eyes and leaned his head against the wall. Innocent. She had been completely, unequivocally innocent. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a frame-up that he had legitimized with his money and rage. Can we fix it? Arthur asked, his voice hollow. I can talk to the DA, Miller said. With your backing and this new evidence, we can petition for an expungement, a full exoneration. It'll take time, but we can clear her name." "Do it," Arthur said. "Whatever it costs, whoever you have to bribe or hire, clear her name." "Already on it." Miller nodded and walked away. Arthur took a deep breath and pushed open the door to room 304. Katie was awake. She was hooked up to an IV drip for severe dehydration and malnutrition. She looked small in the hospital bed, her pale skin blending in with the sheets. Her eyes were staring at the ceiling. She turned her head when Arthur entered. She didn't smile. She didn't look angry. She just looked wary. "You're still here," she said, her voice raspy. "I'm not going anywhere," Arthur said quietly. He dragged a chair over to the bedside, but he didn't sit. He felt he didn't deserve to sit. "The doctor says you're exhausted, malnourished, but you'll recover physically." "Physically," Katie repeated. "Sure." Arthur reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a velvet box. Katie flinched. "If that's a watch, I'm going to throw it at you." Arthur managed a weak, sad smile. "It's not a watch." He opened it. Inside was a silver key. "This is not for an apartment," Arthur said. "This is for the Sterling estate, specifically for the East Wing." Katie frowned. "I don't want your charity, Arthur. I don't want to be a kept woman, paid to keep quiet about your past mistakes." "It's not charity," Arthur said firmly. "It's a job offer. But not as a maid, and not as a waitress." He placed the box on the side table. "I fired Jessica this morning," Arthur said. Katie's eyebrows shot up. "Your fiancé?" "Ex-fiancé. She didn't care about Lily. She cared about the reflection of herself in the windows of my life. I realized that last night." Arthur sighed, rubbing his face. "Katie, I have money. I have staff. I have doctors. Lily has the best physical therapists in the world, but she hates them. She fights them. She's miserable." He leaned in, his intensity returning. "But she didn't fight you. You moved with her. You understood the rhythm of her body." "It's somatic empathy," Katie said quietly. "Dancers have it. We speak in movement. Lily, she has music inside her, but her body is a cage. I just showed her where the door was." "Exactly," Arthur said. "I want to hire you as her somatic therapist. I want you to live in the house. I want you to work with her every day, dance with her, stretch her, teach her. Whatever you did in that restaurant. I want you to do that for the rest of her life." Katie looked at the key. It was a lifeline, a way out of the poverty that had been drowning her. But pride was a difficult thing to kill. "And what about the past?" Katie asked. "What about the 10 years I lost? Does this job make us even?" Arthur dropped to his knees again, right there on the hospital linoleum. "No," he said, looking up at her. "Nothing makes us even. I can never pay you back for what I took. I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to you. I've already started the legal process to have your record expunged. I'm setting up a trust in your name today with $5 million. "I don't want your money," Katie snapped. "It's not for you to spend," Arthur corrected. "It's for you to start a foundation, a dance school, a scholarship program for at-risk kids. Whatever you want. You were supposed to change the world of dance, Katie. I stopped that. I want to give you the resources to start again." Katie stared at him. She saw the desperation in his face. He wasn't trying to buy her silence. He was trying to buy his own redemption. "I don't care about the money," Katie whispered. I miss dancing, and She paused. "I felt something with Lily. She's special." "She is," Arthur said, "and she's waiting for you." Arthur pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. He turned it toward Katie. It was a live video feed from Lily's room in the mansion. The girl was sitting in her wheelchair, looking at the door. She was holding something in her lap. It was a pair of old, worn-out ballet slippers. "Where did she get those?" Katie gasped. "We found them in your backpack," Arthur admitted. "The nurse gave them to me. I brought them home to Lily this morning before coming back here. She hasn't let go of them. She's waiting for her partner." Tears welled in Katie's eyes. The wall she had built around her heart, the wall of cynicism and survival, finally crumbled. "I can't walk very well," Katie admitted, her voice trembling. "My ankles, the prison shoes, the concrete floors." "Then we will get you the best doctors," Arthur promised. "We will fix you, Katie, just like you're going to fix us." Katie reached out and took the silver key. She held it tight, the metal biting into her palm. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay. Take me to her." 3 months had passed since the night at the cliffs. The Sterling estate had changed. The heavy, oppressive silence that used to hang over the hallways like a shroud was gone. In its place was music. It wasn't the polite, classical background music of wealth. It was vibrant, eclectic. Sometimes it was Tchaikovsky, sometimes it was Motown, sometimes it was modern pop. In the newly renovated East Wing, which had been converted into a state-of-the-art studio, Katie Jenkins stood in front of a wall of mirrors. She was wearing a simple black leotard and leggings. She looked healthier. The dark circles were gone, her cheeks had colour, and her posture was regaining the regal lift of a prima. In front of her sat Lily. But Lily wasn't in her electric wheelchair. She was in a specialized harness system that Katie had designed with a team of engineers Arthur had hired. Bungee cords hung from the ceiling, clipped to a soft vest around Lily's torso, supporting her weight while allowing her freedom of movement. "Ready, Lil?" Katie asked, smiling. Lily grinned, a bit of drool escaping the corner of her mouth, which she wiped away with a coordination she hadn't possessed 3 months ago. She nodded vigorously. "Okay. Position 1. Katie clapped her hands. Lily pushed off the floor. The bungees took her weight. Her legs, usually twisted and stiff, straightened as gravity was defied. She swung through the air, her face pure ecstasy. Arthur stood in the doorway, watching. He leaned against the frame, a coffee cup in his hand. He watched them every day. It was his penance and his reward. He had changed, too. The suits were less severe. He left the office at 4:00 p.m. every day, no exceptions. The stock price of Sterling Dynamics had actually gone up. It turned out a CEO who wasn't fueled by rage made better decisions. But the story wasn't over. There was one loose end. The front doorbell rang, a heavy, aggressive ring. Arthur's face hardened. He checked his watch. "She's early." He walked out of the studio, closing the door gently so as not to disturb the lesson. He walked down the grand staircase to the foyer, where the butler, Higgins, was looking uncomfortable. Standing in the entryway was Jessica Voss. She looked disheveled. Her social standing had plummeted since the breakup. Arthur hadn't just fired her. He had blacklisted her from the charity circuit, effectively cutting off her oxygen supply. "Arthur," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "I got your letter. You're suing me?" Arthur descended the stairs calmly. "I am, for the return of the engagement ring, the misappropriation of funds on my credit cards, and for defamation." "Defamation?" Jessica laughed shrilly. "I haven't said a word about you." "Not about me," Arthur said, reaching the bottom step. "About Katie." He held up a tablet. It showed a tabloid article. "Billionaire's new fling. From jailbird to mistress." The source was anonymous, but the details, the specifics about the restaurant, the assault, could only have come from one person. "You tried to poison the well," Arthur said quietly. "You couldn't stand that I chose a criminal over you, so you tried to ruin her reputation again." "She is a criminal," Jessica shrieked. "She's a thief, a low-life waitress, and you have her in your house with your daughter. You're sick, Arthur." "She is an exonerated woman," Arthur corrected, his voice like steel. "As of this morning, the judge signed the order. Her record is clean. And the man who actually stole the watch, Vance, was arrested in Florida yesterday. He gave a full confession." Jessica's face paled. "But here is the twist, Jessica," Arthur said, stepping closer. "Vance didn't just confess to the theft. He confessed to who paid him to plant the watch." The color drained completely from Jessica's face. She took a step back. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Vance was the catering manager," Arthur said. "But you were the event planner for that gala 10 years ago. I hired you. That's how we met." Arthur's eyes bore into hers. "You were jealous. You saw me looking at the young dancer during the rehearsal. You saw me charmed by her talent. You wanted the billionaire, and you saw a threat. So you paid Vance $5,000 to make sure she disappeared." "That's a lie," Jessica screamed. "He's lying." "He has the bank transfer records," Arthur said simply. "It's over, Jessica. The police are waiting at the gate. You're not just leaving my house. You're going to where you sent Katie for 3 years." Jessica's knees buckled. She turned to run, but 2 uniformed officers stepped out from the library. As Jessica was handcuffed, sobbing and screaming about her silk dress, just like she had that night at the restaurant, Arthur didn't feel triumph. He felt a cleansing. The last toxicity of his past was being removed. He turned his back on her and walked back up the stairs. He returned to the studio. He opened the door. Music was swelling, the climax of Swan Lake. Katie was spinning, slowly, carefully, favoring her weak ankle, but spinning nonetheless. And Lily was spinning with her, suspended in the air, her legs kicking in perfect time, her laughter rising above the music. Katie saw Arthur. She stopped, breathing hard, sweating. She saw the look on his face, the peace. She knew. The past was dead. Arthur walked into the room. He didn't stop at the edge. He walked onto the dance floor. He walked up to the bungee system. He looked at his daughter, hanging in the air like an angel. "Hi, Daddy," Lily choked out. Arthur froze. It was slurred. It was rough. But it was a word, her first word in years. Tears instantly flooded Arthur's eyes. He looked at Katie. Katie was beaming, tears streaming down her own face. "She's been practicing," Katie whispered. "She wanted to surprise you." Arthur wrapped his arms around Lily's suspended form, burying his face in her neck. "Hi, baby," he sobbed. "Hi, Lily." He looked over Lily's shoulder at Katie. He extended his hand. "May I?" he asked. Katie smiled. She stepped forward and took his hand. And there, in the sunlight streaming through the windows of the East Wing, the billionaire, the waitress, and the girl who learned to fly began to dance. Arthur Sterling learned the hard way that true wealth isn't what you have in the bank. It's who you have beside you when the music stops. Katie didn't just save Lily, she saved Arthur from a prison of his own making. It just goes to show, you never know whose life you're touching or whose heart you're breaking with a single judgment. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button. It helps us share more powerful stories like this one. Don't forget to share this with someone who needs a reminder that it's never too late for redemption. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a twist. What would you have done in Arthur's shoes? Let us know in the comments below.